start recording because I can still share from here. Yes. Oh, here's my Kindle. There we go. So I've filled around with the format. So we've got this section all on one page. Who shall start?
I will.
Alrighty.
Okay, from the top, I take it, top of the page.
Yes.
Error cannot really threaten truth, which can always withstand it. Hello? Only the error is actually vulnerable. You are free to establish your kingdom where you see fit, but the right choice is inevitable if you remember this. Spirit is in a state of grace forever. Your reality is only spirit. Therefore, you are in a state of grace forever. Holy moly.
We just break that down. we
back,
left it here last
Linda.
week and we're going to have to, sit on that one for a bit. So,
I wrote that down because I think we've read this before. But
yeah, we left it here.
Yeah, but when we got that quote, spirit is in a state of grace forever, your reality is only spirit, therefore you are in a state of grace forever. That is such a beautiful quote. If you really think about all the things we worry about, well, I'll just stick with myself, all the things I'm concerned about. I look at, I'm in a state of grace forever, and my true reality is only spirit. I'm not the body, I'm not my personality, I'm not the things I have or own. It's just spirit, and we're governed by grace. Does anybody else get that from the perspective of what you get concerned about in life? If you frame it with this orbiting around your worry, what happens to you?
Yeah, you're right. When you explain it like that, Gary, it's easier to unpick, because I know for myself, since buying my motorhome, there is no worry. I'm not worrying about anything anymore. I can't afford to worry. So therefore, does that mean that I'm in my state of grace?
Well, you're in a surrendered state see, I think, and this is just my approach, and it may not be accurate, but I think we have to practice acts of intentional connection to God in our day-to-day lives, which means that for me, it means that I was working with a client today, and he's Indian, East Indian, and he said, "Oh, Gary, I got my mantras for my meditation." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome." And I asked him what the Sanskrit words meant. And he said, they mean union and connection. And the literal translation of it's not mine, meaning that the world is not mine, my ego is not mine. And I said, so then how often do you repeat your mantra during the day? He said, I only meditate for 15 minutes in the morning. I said, if you want to create a powerful connection to the divine, it has to be like a lover knocking on the door of the beloved every hour, every day, without fail. So if you had a suitor or someone that you wanted to pursue, and they never answered your phone calls and they never answered the door when you knocked, and they don't reach out to you and they don't call out your name, how attached would you be? And he said, not very. I said, then be a lover of God and call out his name all throughout the day. Because his whole intent was, I want to strengthen my spiritual connection. I said, well, you have to feed it. So this is one of the things that I think is important for all of us, is that if we can walk around in the state of grace, knowing that our focus and our our language is really what designates our devotion, and we didn't spill it out or have it be drained out of us through worry and concern about what's going to happen to us because we don't trust or have faith. If we walked around in a state of grace forever, what do you think we would attract to ourselves? Far better things, I think, than what we've attracted thus far. I had a class last night that I taught. It actually was really good, V.
Yeah.
It's the first time I did that kind of webinar. And we had about 25 people show up for it. And I was like, I have no idea how many people are going to come. There may just be 3. There may not be any. And then I made up the decision. I said, great, I'm going to do this class whether there's 3 people or there's 40 people. It doesn't matter to me, because I'm doing this out of service. And as soon as I made that decision, which was last Friday, all these people showed up. And it was really good. And generally in a webinar like this, where you're giving information about a course you're going to be teaching, people just check out. Most of these people didn't know me. And so they just check out. They stay for 15 minutes and go, oh, I'm checking out. But because I was in was in the presenter's role in service, every single person stayed and every single person clapped at the end of it. So I'm thinking, how does that happen? It isn't that, I'm such a great guy. It's that when someone shows up and they're authentic and they're in service to them, they so appreciate it, because most of those things are a straight sales job. Just like a straight sales job. You've been on those before, haven't you, V?
Oh, yeah.
And there's this whole strategy that you go through as a presenter, and you offer these free gifts, and it's limited time only, and you have to buy now. And I'm like, can I say a bad word? I'm going to say a bad word.
Go.
Fuck that. I was like, why would I treat people like they were completely stupid and wanted, I'm going to coerce them by giving them some extra free gifts to come join me for 2 months. I mean, if your intention is to empower people, why the heck would you try to coerce people by disempowering them out of their choice? Either you come or you don't come. Either it's right for you or it's not right. Either you get it or you don't get it. If you get it, great. If you don't get it, it'd be like me pulling a camel through the eye of the needle. I'm not interested. But if you get it, I will be like of total service to you. And that's what works. It works in everything. It doesn't just work in that context. It works in every context. This is why when we show up and we know our life is governed by grace and we have no fear, then what begins to happen? We start exuding grace, and more grace comes to us. Fear, fear literally is the destroyer of grace. Because when we fear, we think we're separate. And if we think we're separate, we're dissociated from God.
This ties in beautifully with the lesson that I just posted today in the group, lesson 69. It's talking about your grievances are just like, your grievances aren't real. And they're just, think of yourself as you're in a circle surrounded by a cloud, but you reach out and there's no cloud. You can walk straight through. And I was thinking that it's not just grievances as well. It's actually fear. When I think of sitting in that circle and dissipating the grievances, it's also the fear of me not being enough and not stepping forward. And I'll be doing talks in Nanup soon, and that's really useful. Thanks, Gary, to actually know that I'm just going to be of service. Whoever shows up, and not to doubt the fact that I have value to add.
It is super important, V. And sometimes I've gotten up on stages, especially when I was presenting for Shell Oil, and I was sitting in the audience, and the presenter before me, this is no joke, so funny, it was hysterical. These people were using words I'd never heard of. Like their vocabulary was like so extraordinarily large. And I'm sitting there going, okay, these are some of the top executives from Shell Oil from around the world. And here I am, I'm going to present to them. And then I get up and my PowerPoints, whoever was in charge of taking my PowerPoints and putting them up on the slide deck, they tried to put my slides in their slide deck on their format. And so when the slides came up on the screen, they were all jumbled and words were everywhere. I looked out at the audience like, how in the hell am I going to present my presentation with no slides? First of all, it makes me look like an idiot. Like I presented my slides to them in that way. It was just this big blow to my face before I even opened my mouth. But I winged it. And I started talking, and I got into the state of, I'm in service. I know more about my topic than they know about my topic. I'm an authority in my own right in this little niche about leadership. And I'm going to present from that. I just turned the PowerPoints off and I riffed. And I just started, talking to the group. I had an hour and a half, and I was just bam, 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 talking to them because I was in service. I was like, I'm in total service to you guys. This is what I'm doing. This is where I'm at. This is what I know. The CEO of Shell Oil Australia got up and hugged me on stage after my presentation. And he looked out at the audience and said, this guy just presented the missing piece to every leadership training we had ever presented at Shell Oil. And I was like, I must have done something right. But it wasn't my intellect. It wasn't my ego. It wasn't this. It was the act of service and the confidence that I had to know my topic, present my topic, and know that I knew more about that topic than anyone else in the room. They were far smarter than me in everything else, but in that topic, I was good. Like ATM machines scare me. I probably couldn't fix a flat tire. I mean, I'm so inept in so many different areas. Robert was like, I can never die and have my soul go to the light because you can't take care of yourself. I'm like, I'll learn. So, I mean, gang, as long as we know one thing good and right, then, and we're a service, we've got grace. Always and forevermore, I think, I love that line. And Jesus did say this. He said, you will know me by how you treat one another. Course in Miracles says you will only walk into heaven hand in hand with your brothers and sisters, which means how we treat one another, how we're in service to one another. That is really the ticket. That's where the miracles happen of oneness. Then that's where the atonement happens of feeling a connection straight with God. I've been talking too much today because I'm on a roll for some reason. I'll shut up.
Don't do that. That's great wisdom, and we all get a lot out of it. That's why we.
Carol, you want to read the next paragraph, darling?
Sure. Atonement undoes all errors in this respect, and thus uproots the source of fear. Whenever you experience God's reassurances as threat, it is always because you are defending misplaced or misdirected loyalty. When you project this to others, you imprison them, but only to the extent to which you reinforce errors they have already made. This makes them vulnerable to the distortions of others, since their own perception of themselves is distorted. The miracle worker can only bless them, and this undoes their distortions and frees them from prison.
This is a great paragraph, but I don't quite get it yet. Does anyone have any insight into this yet? And then we'll start pulling it apart sentence by sentence.
I think it's about that whole empowerment thing, isn't it? It's empowering people. Even if somebody makes a mistake, mistake, we're human. Human means mistake. So, it's in my mind, that is about empowering people. When I think of, my friend, for example, she's always living in fear. She's always overthinking things. She's always, and then we'll make a random comment like, I just need someone to tell me what to do. So instead of telling her what to do, you just ask her to think about it in a way that's actually going to undo that fear and help her step forward. So and for me, that whole thing just spells out empowerment.
Yeah.
Mm.
B, you have anything you want to add to what Linda said?
I love what you just said, Linda. Empowerment, yeah, and it's through. I also feel like this is coming from the direction of we need to recognize our own beauty in imperfection and not judge ourselves, because that's where it all starts from. It's being placed because you are defending misplaced or misdirected loyalty. So when we look at ourselves, we're just projecting whatever we're feeling onto other people.
That makes sense, V, because when we're judging ourselves, that's when we're judging others.
Absolutely.
If we're not judging ourselves, the judgment of others tends to fall off. We'll just look at people as they are and what they're doing and how they're reacting. And so, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. And they just become quite beautiful then, don't they?
Yep.
You can let them just be themselves. Yeah.
You can see the light. Like you can see that light around them. Yeah.
Carly, is there anything you want to add or subtract from that?
I had quite an extreme example of this just last weekend. I think it was just after this call last week. Kevin came in and said, do you want to go to Wanganui for the weekend? And I said, yes. Why? What are we going to do there? And we were invited to this a group that Kevin's doing the website for, that they're called Mana Man, and it's for men, Maori men, who have been drug addicts, been to prison, whatever, that sort of stuff, and they had done it. And they had been enlightened. They'd done a lot of, work on themselves to get past all of their sort of beliefs that they had about, controlling women and children and a lot of stuff. And being in that marae on Saturday, it was like everybody glowed. It was amazing. And they weren't these big, scary men. They were like cuddly and lovely.
That's awesome.
It was, yeah.
What kind of work were they doing to get free of their past?
Well, it was very Maori based, so it was their sort of like the word mana, when they sort of their old belief of that. Well, it was changing their beliefs really, because they had believed that to be a strong man you had to be a fighter basically, and then they were learning, changing to being in their own power basically,
because it is a very strong culture, isn't it? Like it's and their beliefs go back generations, and that's they I mean, when you think of the movie Once Were Warriors, when I first came to Australia, it was like, oh, once were warriors, is that true? It's like, well, yeah, it is. It's actually absolutely true. And we saw that, my family saw that, because we lived in a Maori village and we saw it every single day in the whole time that we lived there. And it's a very, very strong culture, very strong.
with intergenerational trauma too. So these
Correct.
men were
Mm.
cycle, and so that was really awesome. Yeah. There was a lot to it, it was a long thing that they'd done. And so, I can't sort of describe it in a couple of minutes, but yeah.
Nice experience then, Coralie.
Yes, yeah, it really, really was.
Mm.
Wow, it sounds beautiful. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall, because I really love the Maori culture, and I don't even know why. I just feel such an affinity to them. And yeah.
And since I've left New Zealand, my patriotism has just skyrocketed. And I listen to my mum, who still lives in New Zealand, and it's not that she's racist, it's just that she gets tired of everything being changed to, like, all the street names, and they're wanting to change the name of New Zealand, and all this sort of stuff. And I listen to her and I hear what she's saying, but then I say to her, but how is that affecting your life, Mum? How does it actually affect you? Oh, well, they want me to learn how to speak Maori and blah, 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 blah. And I just say to her, but you don't have to. You can just say no. So it's it's really interesting. But since being away from them, I love it when my friends, like, I'll come out with a Maori word every once in a while. Like, we were watching TV the other night, and a guy had quite a big belly on him, and I said, oh, he's got a big puku. And then it's like, oh, well, what does puku mean? So then you go into all these different words, and while I don't understand sentences, it's interesting the amount of Maori words that I actually know. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of my culture. I'm proud of being a Kiwi. And I think it's a beautiful culture. And just like the white man, I suppose, we've got our faults as well. They've got their faults, but in the overall big picture, it's a beautiful, wonderful culture.
I would love to be a New Zealander, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I like all the names changing, because they were not good names. Like, anywhere with the word grey in it, I'm just like, nah, change that. Why do you want to be grey?
Yeah.
Well, it's close as it had been.
So would it be okay if I read this over again? Because I want to make sure that I get it. Say, so atonement undoes all errors in this respect. I must be in that grace, that we're only grace, and thus uproots the source of our fear. Whenever you experience God's reassurances as threat, it is always because you are defending misplaced or misdirected loyalty. That was the one sentence that kind of tripped me up. Whenever you experience God's reassurances as threat, does anyone have an example of what that would mean, or an example in your own life?
It certainly seems to be a bit of the Christian philosophy, is that you will, if you commit sins, then you are, you need to do 700 Hail Marys and whatever. So it's like, that's kind of a lot. It seems to be what what some of the Christian faith is all about, is that, you will be punished for your sins, kind of thing. So that's about creating a threat and fear rather than love.
That makes total sense.
For myself, even the word God to me is a threat, because I'm not religious, but I have spiritual beliefs. I believe in the divine. I believe in source. I believe in the universe. So God, the word God for me has always been a threat, while now I can hear the word or say the word. It's not as much of a threat anymore, because I see it differently. Whereas when I was growing up, God was associated with Christians or Cathology or, whatever. but I don't see it as a threat anymore because I can see it for what it is rather than for how I grew up with that word.
I think that's great. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so when you project this to others, you imprison them, but only to the extent to which you reinforce errors they have already made. So this must be talking about like the separation. For some reason, this just isn't landing in my head in the right compartmentalization. So when you project this, so projecting this misdirected, misplaced loyalty to the appearance of separation and judgment of others and all of that. When you project this to others, you imprison them. Okay, I get that. But only to the extent to which you reinforce errors they've already made. This makes them vulnerable to distortions of others, because as you judge, then they judge, since their own perception of themselves is distorted. The miracle worker can only bless them, and this undoes their distortions and frees them from prison. Okay, that makes more sense now.
So is that and correct me if I'm wrong, but is that about if they look to you for answers, and I'm not saying ego here, I'm just saying that, you know, if you're respected in what you say and there's a disagreement or a debate about it, that no, I think I'm answering that in my own head as I'm talking, actually. Maybe I should just shut up for a second.
It often helps to verbalize it.
Yeah,
What-
I'm just thinking that, because I know with my friend that she will look to me for some answers, which is fabulous, and I think that that's just, and I do the same to her. It's a respect thing. I do the same with you, V. But when it says, when you project this to others, you imprison them, but only to the extent to which you reinforce errors they have already made. So if they've actually made a decision based on whatever was going on around them at the time, but now it's become an issue for them, you haven't actually turned around and said, well, you made a mistake, or maybe you have, you made a mistake, but you based it on things that were happening at the time. So it's a matter of moving forward now. But does that make them vulnerable in your eyes because you've seen that and they weren't able to? So now they kind of feel a bit disempowered? Or am I being too literal about this?
Personally, I think you may be being too literal. I think it has more to do with what you're doing inside your head with your own judgments.
Yeah.
So God, God reassurances as a threat. It is because you are defending misplaced and misdirected loyalty. And in my mind, it's like when you do that, you are seeing the separation. You're seeing it black and white, rules bound by regulations. And so it's loyalty to something else. It's loyalty to dogma. When you project it to others, you imprison them. So think about what churches have done to the masses. They fundamentally said, you need to do this, X, Y, and Z. You need to do this, X, Y, and Z. And if you don't, you are condemned to hell forever. So when you project this misdirected loyalty onto others, you imprison them only to the extent to which you reinforce errors they've already made. So for the gay community, what churches have done is fundamentally said the fundamental aspect of who you are, being attracted to the same sex rather than the opposite sex, which is not something anybody chooses, by the way. No one ever woke up one day and said, okay, on this day, I'm going to choose to be attracted to women instead of men, or for men to be attracted to women instead of men. I mean, that doesn't happen. There's not a day that you actually choose what your body responds to sexually. And if you don't respond to that sexually, it's be like, okay, well, then what do I do with that? It was very
That
confusing.
conformity.
Yeah, I was
Mm.
very confused as a young boy. I'm like, my dad said, "Oh, it'll just come naturally to you." I'm like, it's not coming naturally to me. I don't get it. Like, I don't get this girl thing. I don't get it. I got guys, but I just didn't get that my body wouldn't respond to girls. So then, so if the church continues to hammer on that, it does imprison people, but only to the extent of which you reinforce the errors they've already made, which means they've believed that the dogma is God. That's what I'm getting from this. Correct me if you guys are seeing something different. Then this makes him vulnerable to the distortion of others, which means they have guilt, which means they don't have a strong sense of their own identity, which means they have a weakened sense of their relationship with God, since their own perception of themselves is distorted. Okay, now that told him, if I put in a context, that makes sense to me. Does that make sense to you guys? You think I got that right, or do you think I got it wrong?
I think there's really heaps of ways of looking at it, because I think that you are both right, but I also would look at that and think, like, if you were mistreating or judging a child, if you were reinforcing errors, that you do diminish them, and like it says, you make them vulnerable. You could do that with a child, make them vulnerable because of the way you treat them, which could be erroneous.
And conformity as well. Everybody's meant to conform to a certain way of doing things. And if you think differently or you take a different path, you judge simply by that, because you're not conforming to what the rest of the sheep are doing as well. So conformity was a word that popped out for me as well.
Yeah,
it's interesting. You're right, Coralie. There's a lot of different ways of looking at that.
Yeah, there is.
I keep coming back to the fact that this is all what we're projecting on other people and putting them into a box, which limits their growth and their ability to connect with us, as well as, broader. But when it says reinforcing errors they have already made, you can swap that to saying it's actually reinforcing errors that we've already made, because I still work through that a lot when I'm coming up with an idea, and it's like, and then this little voice says, "So how did that work out last time?" in a sarcastic little tone.
Yeah.
It's like, it's still working through that to say, no, I'm going to take the lesson, but I'm going to leave the judgment behind. And that's definitely still a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
So we do that for ourselves, but we also do it for other people. What we do to ourselves, we do to others.
Which has now gone 360, hasn't it? Because that's basically what we were saying at the start, was that it's what we do to ourselves is what we do to others.
I love the last sentence where it says, "A miracle worker can only bless them, and this undoes their distortions and frees them from prison." And the miracle worker, because remember we went through that whole chapter on miracles and atonement. That's still about the miracle worker seeing the spark of God in others, no matter what, which blesses them and then frees them from all the judgment and all of the boundaries and conditions put around them.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I will just stop the page once I've finished typing that one out, because I love that. Next section. All right, I guess it's my turn to read.
Yep.
All right. You respond to what you perceive, and as you perceive, so shall you behave. The golden rule asks you to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This means that the perception of both must be accurate. The golden rule is the rule for appropriate behavior. You cannot behave appropriately unless you perceive correctly. Since you and your neighbor are equal members of one family, as you perceive both, so you will both do to both. You should look out for the perception of your own holiness to the holiness of others. This is very much what I was just thinking about. Yeah, that's cool.
And it goes back to the whole miracle worker thing where you have to stop all judgment of others and just choose to see the light and the spark of God in them. And that's all without judgment or condemnation. Not easy to do, by the way.
Mm. Yeah,
So
agreed.
I just wanted to have a little conversation because I think it's really important to see how this applies into our daily lives. Like, how do we do that? Like, what are the thoughts we choose to think, and how do we produce these minor miracles in our everyday life? So would anyone like to share what you're doing or what you desire to do differently than what you've been doing? Because
well, I just had a bit of a miracle yesterday because
I'll go for it.
I have this weird relationship with my sister, and we often don't talk for lengths of time. And she might start messaging me, and she's made up all this stuff about how I hate her and I'm not being a good sister and blah, blah, blah. And so instead of, and she sent me a message about, you know, why the silence again yesterday morning. And I just thought, I'll just give her a call and I'll let her talk. I'm not going to defend myself because I know I've done nothing wrong, and I'll just let her talk. And that's all she wanted to do, was actually just to be heard. And that was quite beautiful.
It is a bit of a miracle.
And it actually gave her the space to apologize for a message that she'd sent me before about me trying to connect with her and actually see her. And she's like, oh, yeah, I'm not important to you. I don't like your attitude. And I just stopped talking. I'm not texting, that kind of stuff. And she actually apologized for that message. But if I'd got up and got on my high and mighty and you know, I just didn't say anything. I just let her talk. And then I told her a bit about my life, and it was quite beautiful. That's how simple it was.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a breakthrough. That's a breakthrough.
Because Linda knows what hard work my sister is.
Because if you go to the paragraph before when it was really talking about how we keep people in the prison based upon the distorted perspective of them, it's really true. I'm undoubtedly doing that to my brother right now. You know, he reached out not too long ago to spend time with me, and I just didn't want to make the time.
I'm like that with my sister as well. I haven't, there's been no contact from her or from me, for that matter, since I left Queensland. So that's what, 6-7 months now?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I have been doing a lot of work though with the daily lessons, which aren't actually daily. I only do them every couple of days, and actually, because some of the lessons need 3 days to sit with before I feel resolved with them. And then I go to the next one and it's like, oh, well, that's what I actually worked on. So it was, yeah, it's funny how they flow so beautifully. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of work on forgiveness and letting go of the grievances and seeing people with just like, it doesn't matter. State of grace is forever. Yep. It's like, yeah, it's just, it really doesn't matter. All these things that people say, it's not personal. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And how is it actually affecting us other than us making up stories in our head?
And how does it affect me? Just let her talk, you know, what, you know, that's, it was an act of service to just listen and not judge and just empathize with her when she was talking about problems but not actually trying to solve them either, which is my big thing. I've always tried to solve everyone's problems. And sometimes I just need to be heard.
You know, I was at the hairdressers this morning having pamper time, which was fabulous. And we were talking, just about that. Just, I've completely lost my train of thought now, but anyway, but we were talking just about that. And it was interesting. And it's interesting how, for myself, the older that I get, the more, I'm not even more empathetic, if that's the right word, to people anymore. It's just going with the flow, just getting on with it, just doing it. Still judging, because that's just, I still do that. And then I have to physically or consciously say to myself, don't judge. You don't like being judged, so don't judge. It still happens, but, at least you're more aware of it. It's a conscious thought now.
Well, I think human beings change in slow increments, but the trick is that we are committed to change.
Yes. Perfect. Perfectly said.
So any more comments on T16? Who's next to read? Is it me or is it someone else?
I think it's you, Gary.
Okay, T17. Miracles arise from a mind that is ready for them. By being united, this mind goes out to everyone, even without the awareness of the miracle worker himself. The impersonal nature of miracles is because the atonement itself is one, uniting all creations with their creator. As an expression of what you truly are, the miracle places the mind in a state of grace. The mind then naturally welcomes the host within and the stranger without. When you bring in the stranger, he becomes your brother.
So is that about trust?
I think
just keep popping out.
I think well, for me, it keeps going back. Maybe this is just kind of where my head's at these days, but it just keeps going back to when they talk about the miracle worker, it's that person who sees the light of God in others and doesn't see the separation, doesn't judge, doesn't see the ego, just sees the light of God in that person. So it is when you're able to do that, the inference here is that impersonal nature of miracles, it says, is because the atonement itself is one, uniting all creations with their creator. So when you do it in one moment, you do it for all of creation. Because in that moment, you see oneness everywhere. For that moment in the physical body, which is the densest part of creation, you actually shine a little bit of a light because you saw the oneness, even if it's for a nanosecond. That's how I'm taking it. Anybody else have anything they want to share about that? Does anyone see anything different?
It makes sense. I just need to sit with the language a little bit.
Carly, do you see anything different, darling?
I just really love that, actually. I'm just reading that as an expression of what you truly are. The miracle places the mind in a state of grace. Because I think we all get that sometimes, that when you feel all sort of lit up and you can see the light in others, and that's sort of, I'm always wanting more of that.
Yeah, I get that, Carly. You've just given me a bit of a goal there. It's like to tap into that feeling, to remember that no matter what's going on around me, I can tap into that feeling.
Mm.
Just remember it. Beautiful. So we keep moving.
Yep.
Carola, you want to do that one?
Sure. That the miracle may have effects on your brothers that you may not recognize is not your concern. The miracle will always bless you. Miracles you are not asked to perform have not lost their value. They are still expressions of your own state of grace, but the action aspect of the miracle should be controlled by me because of my complete awareness of the whole plan. The impersonal nature of miracle-mindedness ensures your grace, but only I am in the position to know where they can be bestowed.
I'm just thinking about what I just said then about tapping into that feeling where you are the light and you can see that in others, and surrendering to that feeling and not being attached to who's in the vicinity while you're feeling that feeling. It doesn't matter if you're carrying that, then you're just spreading light everywhere, aren't you? Like fairy dust.
Yeah, to me, it's also saying like you can do that, and maybe the people who you think should be, lighting up because you've sprinkled them might not. They might not even notice that you're there, but that's not the point.
It's impersonal. It's for everyone.
Mm.
Mm.
This is something that I'm a little fuzzy on. He says, they are still expressions of your own state of grace, but the action aspect of the miracle should be controlled by me because of my complete awareness of the whole plan. So I'm thinking, who is me? Is it supposedly the Christ speaking? And then it says the impersonal nature of miracle mindedness ensures your grace, but only I am in a position to know where they can be bestowed. But that aspect of the should be controlled by me because of my complete awareness of the whole plan. So is it that we just stay in that state of oneness as much as we can, show as much grace to others as much as we can, have no concern over the effects of that state of mind, and just surrender that over to a higher power for the utilization for however it's to be used? Is that what it's saying?
That sounds exactly what it's saying to me. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking too. As soon as I hear things like the miracle should be controlled by me, and I'm only in the position to know where they can bestow it, the hairs in the back of my neck kind of rise up just a little bit. Okay. Yeah. Who's next?
Linda?
Miracles are selective only in the sense that they are directed toward those who can use them for themselves. Since this makes it inevitable that they will extend them to others, a strong chain of atonement is welded. Oh, excuse me, I've got ants crawling on me. However, this selectivity takes no account of the magnitude of the miracle itself, because the concept of size exists on a plane that is itself unreal. Since the miracle aims at restoring the awareness of reality, it would not be useful if it were bound by laws that govern the error it aims to correct.
Ah, okay. Does anyone have any insight? Because I think I've got it.
Well, I was a bit confused with that last sentence, but I guess it comes back to as Einstein says, and you've said it, Gary, as well, is that you can't solve a problem from the same level of logical thinking. Yeah.
So, but what I'm getting from it is, however, the selectivity can takes no account of the magnitude of the miracle, because the concept of size exists on a plane that is itself unreal, meaning that the physical realm is not reality. And so when you look at what's the size of the miracle, that means there's great miracles and not so great miracles, huge miracles and little tiny miracles. You know, for all we know, that the act of saving a bird from a cat, or picking up an insect in your house, and rather than killing it, you put it outside on a plant, that those little acts of miracles of oneness, because you want to cause no harm, may have a reverberating effect through time and space and touch all creation. We don't know that. And what I think it's saying is there's no magnitude to miracles. It's when you choose to see that oneness in all things, because the physical realm is not real, so it can't be measured by the laws that bound or govern the error in the first place, which is like there's a separation, there's good, bad, big, small. Actually, I think it's saying that the miracle is all encompassing for all things. What do you guys think? You think that's accurate?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got time for one more.
Righty. Oh, starting in the next one, the escape from darkness. I think it's my turn. The escape from darkness involves two stages. First, the recognition that darkness cannot hide. This step usually entails fear. Second, the recognition that there is nothing you want to hide, even if you could. This step brings escape from fear. When you have become willing to hide nothing, you will not only be willing to enter into communion, but will also understand peace and joy. So what exactly is the darkness? Is that just the lack of light? Not tapping into our state of grace, showing away from it?
And it seems as if that it is almost synonymous to fear, to a fear state. When you've become willing to hide nothing, because if you're willing to not hide anything, that means you're not judging yourself. Because it's only when you judge yourself that you hide those aspects of yourself. So when you're no longer judging yourself or judging others, you will not only be willing to enter into communion, but will also understand peace and joy. So I think that the aspect of not condemning others is a deep reference to not condemning ourselves. What do you guys think? Add, subtract? Different interpretation?
I think the hiding as well is something that we're not even aware of it in a lot of ways. And our own little, 70,000 thoughts that we have a day are often keeping us hidden from ourselves to some extent.
Yeah.
So that's why I think the meditations with the lessons are just proving so useful for me, because it's allowing things to rise that I haven't wanted to face before. And it's not creating this huge emotional state, because I'm not judging them anymore. And it's just, oh, well, that's interesting. I don't think I'll think that anymore.
Yeah.
And it's not about hiding any of it either.
Yeah, yeah. It's the safety to actually be able to expose these things. Feeling safe enough to do it. Because there's nothing to fear.
Yep.
Cool.
Should we read one more, but not try to explain it? We'll just read it and then we'll explain it later.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Holiness can never be really hidden in darkness, but you can deceive yourself about it. This deception makes you fearful because you realize in your heart it is a deception and you exert enormous efforts to establish its reality. The miracle sets reality where it belongs. Reality belongs only to spirit, and the miracle acknowledges only truth. It thus dispels illusion about yourself and puts you in communion with yourself and God. The miracle joins in the atonement by placing the mind in the service of the Holy Spirit. What's that word? Publishes?
Shall we just keep on? Shall we stop there, or do you want to keep reading?
Yeah. Let's stop there because I think that was a beautiful place to stop. So, gang, I have a challenge for us.
Uh-oh.
I know. This next coming week, why don't we wake up in the morning and go, I'm in service to the Holy Spirit and to the atonement between all living things. I'm an instrument of that. That would be very cool to practice.
Can you make it a shorter sentence?
How about I'm in service to miracles?
I'm in service to the Holy Spirit. Or I produce miracles. Today's my day to produce miracles. I got a client after you guys, and I am going to practice producing a miracle with that client.
Beautiful.
Nice.
You guys good?
Yeah, I got lots out of that one.
Me too. Okay, let's do our word, our sentence.
I've got mine. I'm spreading miracles like fairy dust.
Miracles equal atonement. Carly?
Bumping up on fabulous.
Linda?
What other people think of you is none of your business.
Right.
Projection of their own mind as is yours of them. Okay, gang. Well, we will see you next week. Thank you so much for showing up. And Linda, when are we going to see you again?
Next Wednesday,
Yay!
hopefully, as long as I've got Wi-Fi.
Sounds good, darling. You take care of yourself.
Thank you. Appreciate you being interested in my travels and stuff. It's awesome.
Oh, no,
It's going to be nice to get back on the road.
I bet. Okay,
Yeah.
gang, take care.
You too.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.